What if the cup of coffee you're holding isn't just a morning ritual, but a financial time bomb? In the 1840s, it was. Long before stocks dominated the ticker, the most powerful financial weapon in the world wasn't a bond or a share. It was a small, dried bean from Brazil. And it brought Wall Street to its knees. We think of panics as stock market crashes, driven by complex derivatives. But the 1840s bean panic was the opposite. It was a crisis born from something agonizingly physical: empty ships arriving at the docks. It was a war fought in the gap between the coffee that was on the dock and the coffee that was still on the water. But this isn't just a maritime history lesson. The same structural flaw that bankrupted New York merchants is re-emerging right now in our global food supply chains. The panic over Brazilian coffee in 1840 directly mirrors the modern panic over grain, soybeans, and cooking oil that's driving the inflation you feel every time you go to the grocery store. By the end of this video, you will learn exactly how this 19th century panic reveals our modern vulnerabilities, and you will understand two critical, timeless strategies derived from it: the strategic buffer and the early warning signal.
This is Finance Beyond Seas. We explore the moments where the currents of maritime history and the tides of the global economy collide. We're here to navigate the wreckage of the past, to find the financial lessons that will protect you today. We analyze history and systems, not futures. Nothing presented here is financial advice. It is purely historical and economic commentary.
To understand the panic, you must first understand the scene. This is 1840s New York. Wall Street exists, but it's not the center of the universe. The real action is happening on the docks and in the counting houses of Front Street and South Street. And the king of all commodities is coffee. America's demand for it is exploding, and nearly all of it, over 70%, comes from one place: Brazil. This single-source dependency, this massive concentration risk, has turned the entire U.S. economy into a hostage. The problem is, Brazil is 5,000 miles away. A journey by sail takes 2, sometimes 3 months. Enter the merchants. A merchant in New York needs to buy coffee, but he can't wait 3 months to know the price. So he uses a forward contract. He agrees to buy a shipment of Brazilian coffee today at a fixed price for delivery when the ship arrives in 60 days. Simultaneously, a coffee roaster in New York needs beans right now. He buys from the warehouse at the spot price, the price for immediate, physical delivery. In a normal world, these two prices, spot and forward, are close. The only difference is the cost of storage and time. But the 1840s were not a normal world. A ship, let's call it the Esperanza, leaves Rio de Janeiro, but its journey is shorter than its news. That ship is carrying more than beans. It's carrying information. Back in New York, the exchange is humming. Merchants are signing forward contracts at 8 cents a pound, expecting the Esperanza to arrive fully loaded. Then, a fast clipper ship arrives first. It carries almost no cargo, only letters. The news is dire. A catastrophic drought, or perhaps a febre amarela, yellow fever outbreak, has decimated the Brazilian harvest. The crop is failing. This information shock, where a sudden physical shortage breaks the paper contracts, is identical to the moment a modern drought in the Panama Canal halts ships or a geopolitical crisis shuts a strait. The financial promise becomes instantly worthless. This very crisis forced the surviving merchants to invent a defense mechanism we'll explore as the strategic buffer. But first, the collapse. The news hits the floor. The spot price, the coffee already in New York warehouses, explodes. It jumps from 8 cents to 15 cents, then 20 cents. It doubles overnight. Why? Because it is suddenly the only coffee that exists. Now consider the merchant who signed that forward contract. He is short. He promised to sell coffee at 8 cents a pound when it arrived, but the Esperanza arrives empty. To fulfill his promise, he must now go to the spot market and buy coffee at 20 cents a pound to sell it for 8 cents a pound.
He is instantly bankrupt. The gap between the spot price, what is, and the forward price, what was promised, isn't a gap. It's a chasm. It's a graveyard for traders. This wave of defaults cascades from the coffee houses to the banks that lent them money. The 1840s bean panic was a supply chain crisis disguised as a financial crisis. The micro lesson was brutal. The financial contract is only as good as the physical reality it's based on. When the ships stop, the paper burns. But it wasn't just nature causing these shocks. Brazil itself learned to weaponize the flow. Fast forward 60 years to the early 1900s. Brazil now produces over 80% of the world's coffee. They are the OPEC of caffeine. To prevent prices from ever falling, the Brazilian government created the valorization scheme. It was state-sponsored market manipulation. When there was a bumper crop, too much coffee, the government wouldn't let it flood the market. Instead, it would buy millions of bags of its own coffee and lock them away in massive warehouses in the port of Santos. They were intentionally creating the same physical shortage that the 1840s drought had caused accidentally. This connected directly to the 1840s lesson. The panic was caused by an uncontrolled supply shock. Brazil's new policy was about controlling the supply shock. The common theme remained. He who controls the physical bean controls the global price. The flow of coffee from the docks at Santos was the financial system. The strategy worked brilliantly until it didn't. How did Brazil pay to keep millions of tons of coffee off the market? They borrowed massively from bankers in London and New York. By the 1920s, Brazil was sitting on a mountain of coffee financed by a mountain of debt. Then, October 1929, the Great Crash. The credit markets in New York and London evaporate. The loans are called in. Brazil can no longer afford to hold its coffee. It must sell. The government that had spent 20 years withholding supply now flooded the market. The coffee price collapsed by over 90%. This collapse didn't just bankrupt Brazil, it deepened the Great Depression, wiping out the very commodity houses that had financed the scheme. The pattern was now crystal clear. Whether by drought, blockade, or a failed government policy, any massive disruption to the physical flow of a concentrated resource will inevitably lead to financial catastrophe.
Fast forward to today, the ships are faster, the data is instant, but the pattern is identical. We've just lived through the 1840s coffee panic, repackaged. When Russia blockaded the Black Sea ports, it wasn't a naval theory. It was a physical stop to the flow of Ukrainian grain. What happened? The spot price of wheat in Chicago and Paris exploded. But the forward contracts, the promises made by bakers in Egypt and processors in Indonesia, were suddenly worthless. They had promised to buy wheat at a price that no longer existed in reality. It's the Esperanza arriving empty all over again. Look at the recent droughts hitting our modern-day Brazils. When a climate event hits Vietnam, a primary source of Robusta coffee and rice, or a drought grips Argentina, a primary source of soy meal, the effect is immediate. We've built a just-in-time global food system that mistakes efficiency for resilience. We have optimized our system to have zero slack, zero buffer. As you can see, whether it's a Brazilian fever in 1840 or a geopolitical blockade today, the technology changes, but the choke point remains. The physical flow is the ultimate arbiter of price. The traders in 1840 who survived were the ones who saw the early warning signals, like a ship arriving with ballast instead of beans. And that lesson, along with the strategic buffer, is now more critical than ever. The pattern is clear. Our financial systems, which are now digital and instantaneous, are built on a physical supply chain that is fragile, aging, and subject to the laws of physics, weather, and politics. That gap between the speed of finance and the speed of things is the fault line. What does this mean for you? Why should this 180-year-old story matter? It matters because your 401k, your mortgage, and your grocery bill are all connected by a 5,000-mile-long steel thread to the docks of Santos, Odessa, and Shanghai. You may not be trading coffee futures, but you buy food, you buy fuel, you buy things. The spot versus forward gap isn't a trader's abstract problem anymore. It is the direct cause of the inflation you feel. When the spot price for natural gas, wheat, or palm oil doubles because a ship is in the wrong place or a pipeline is shut down, that cost doesn't stay on an exchange floor. It is passed instantly to you. The real risk is not a 2008-style credit collapse. The real risk is an 1840-style physical collapse. A crisis where the money is available, but the thing you want to buy, the food, the fuel, the part, is simply not on the dock. To be unprepared for this is to be the 1840s merchant confidently signing a contract for a ship that will never arrive.
So how do you protect yourself? How do you navigate a world where the physical world is reasserting its dominance? The lesson is not to buy this asset or that. The lesson is to change your mindset. We must learn from the survivors of the bean panic. 1. The strategic buffer, the anti-just-in-time model. The 1840s merchants who survived were the ones who already had coffee in their warehouses. They weren't 100% reliant on the next ship. They had a buffer. Our modern system has taught us that inventory is a cost, but the 1840 panic teaches us that inventory is insurance. For a nation or a large company, this means diversifying suppliers, not just buying from Brazil, and holding strategic reserves. For you, it's a question. Where in your life are you running just in time? Your income, your food supply, your skills? A buffer isn't hoarding, it's resilience. It is the savings, the pantry, or the diversified skill set that allows you to survive a 60-day shipping delay in your own life. 2. The early warning signal. Watch the ships, not the ticker. By the time the panic hit the New York Exchange, it was too late. The real signal wasn't the price, it was the empty dock in Rio. Today, we are drowning in financial news, the price, but starved of physical news, the flow. The early signals are not in financial reports. They are in drought maps. They are in shipping insurance rates for high-risk passages. They are in port congestion data and satellite imagery of reservoir levels. Financial markets are lagging indicators. They are the last to react. The physical world, the climate, the ships, the inventories, is the leading indicator. The panic only begins when the financial world is forced to accept a physical reality it can no longer ignore. We've looked at the Brazilian bean, but this story has always been about flow. The global economy is a circulatory system. The seas are the arteries, and commodities are the lifeblood. The Irish philosopher George Bernard Shaw once wrote, "We learn from history that we learn nothing from history." But that's too cynical. We can learn. The 1840s panic was not a failure of coffee, it was a failure of imagination. The merchants couldn't imagine the ships arriving empty. The bankers in 1929 couldn't imagine the credit taps turning off. Our modern economy is suffering the same failure of imagination. We can't imagine the shelves being empty. Don't be surprised. Look past the financial ledgers. Watch the water. Watch the flow. That is where you will find the truth. That is how you stay ahead of the tides. If this 180-year-old coffee panic gave you a new perspective on modern inflation, subscribe to Finance Beyond Seas. We're here to chart these hidden risks. Our mission is to analyze the systems of the past to protect you today. What early warning signal are you watching right now? Let us know in the comments.